All right, good evening, everybody from Nenana, Alaska. My name is Adam White, and it is time for the Alaska Airmen's Association August Government Affairs Update. We're gonna just see who all is able to join in. I just want to start off saying I did get a couple of emails from folks. Thank you for reading your emails and sending in some questions and some comments for tonight's update. Also want to remind you that we do have these things posted on our YouTube channel. So if you're not able to watch them live, you can go back and look at them on Facebook. Instagram's a little more difficult, but you can still find them there, and then they'll always be archived on the YouTube channel. So let your friends know. A lot of folks are tuning in for this to get some updates on things, and appreciate the questions that have come in the comments. So we're going to go ahead and just jump right in. First, I want to say how sad and tragic it is to lose friends with the mid-air collision that occurred on the Kenai Peninsula last week. Tragedy, loss of 7 lives in a mid-air collision there. And so NTSB is still doing their investigation. It'll be quite some time before their final report is out. Some initial data is already known. A lot of things that we think we know have changed throughout the time. If you were looking at the news reports, a lot of inconsistencies in reporting, a lot of confusion as to the type of aircraft involved and other things. So as we continue on that journey of trying to figure out what happened, rest assured that the Airmen's Association is doing our part to find out what we can do to help educate you, our members, as to what we can do to make sure something like this never happens again. It's always a tragedy when there's an accident, especially when there's a loss of life. And so our thoughts and prayers do go out to the families of those involved and friends as well. And like I said, a lot of information still yet to be known. And the National Transportation Safety Board does have a huge task ahead of them to figure out what can be done to stop these in the future. One thing I do want to talk about some of this, though, is that it's important that we make sure we have all of our ducks in a row. Always it's important to do that. But in times like this, you need to make sure your information is current. Your registry information is current. You need to make sure that you're, not just for your airplane, the registry, but as well as for your emergency locator transmitter. That information does need to be updated with NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The Rescue Coordination Center here in Alaska accesses that database to know who to contact to find out if an ELT transmission is in fact a real live event or a false alarm. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of that here in just a minute. But with hunting season basically upon us right now, caribou season and sheep season is open. Moose season is around the corner. A lot of folks are starting to fly that haven't flown for a long time. Pre-COVID days, August has traditionally been a rather high month for aviation accidents here in Alaska. I'm afraid that this month, with the inactivity due to the COVID pandemic, that a lot of folks haven't been flying as much this summer, and we need to be careful. You need to go out with a friend, a trusted colleague, a flight instructor, and make sure you have not picked up any bad habits or lost some of that very time-sensitive skill set that does have an expiration date. Whether it's an FAA-imposed expiration date or if it's just from the lack of use, our skill levels tend to atrophy, just like our muscles do. Skill levels flying an airplane are the same way. So please, please, please be careful. Remember the saying that I've said numerous times here on these updates that I remind myself of before every single flight. There's no big deal to be a day late. It's a serious issue to be years too early. So please make sure you're making your decisions, you're weighing all the pros and the cons, and make sure that you're doing the wise and the right thing to do. Now with that, survival gear is always an important thing to remember as we come up to the dare I say, close to the end of the summer season. But being in the woods out pursuing game, need to make sure your survival gear is appropriate for where you're going. A lot of people are now going to start flying in parts of the state that they don't normally operate in. Is your survival gear that you always carry adequate and appropriate? Go through that stuff. Personally, every time I do a gear change on the mall, the airplane here behind me, I go through my entire survival gear. So that's basically when I go from wheels to skis, when I go from skis back to wheels, very short time frame most years, this year a little different, but wheels to floats, and then floats back to wheels. So go through that survival gear, make sure it's appropriate for what you're doing. It doesn't do any good to carry it if you don't know how to use it. Make sure you know and understand how to use the gear that you carry, and make sure the people who fly with you know and understand how to use the gear that you carry. One of the things that I did get an email about, which is very appropriate and very timely, there is a big problem with folks not keeping the registration information current on your emergency locator transmitter. Keep that information current. You can do it online. It's free. It's quick and easy. You get a sticker back in the mail. It's not that big a deal to do, but it's very important to make sure your contact information is correct. Very important to make sure that the aircraft information is correct, so that if there is an activation of an ELT, the Rescue Coordination Center knows what to do and knows who to contact. And there's some folks that don't know the difference or understand the difference between an emergency locator transmitter, a personal locator beacon, and an EPIRB. And I'm trying to remember exactly now what EPIRB stands for, but anyway, EPIRBs are more for marine use. They're required by the Coast Guard on boats. Personal locator beacon is something that you carry on yourself when you're out hiking around. And an ELT is what's required for aircraft. Now, you can carry a personal locator beacon while you are flying in an aircraft. I do that myself. It's in my survival gear. It's in my vest that I wear all the time. It's important that those other forms of radio transmitters are also updated, because they all use the 406 megahertz ELT frequency, also for the personal locator beacon and also for the EPIRBs. So that brings up another point. How old is your ELT? Is it just the 121.5 version, or is it a 406? 406 is going to be monitored by the satellites. 121.5 is no longer monitored by satellites. Hopefully you know that. Hopefully you understand that. Hopefully you have weighed the risk that's involved with that. I'm not going to tell you how to equip. I'm not going to tell you what to do with that. There is no legal mandate to have one over another. The FCC, however, has gone back and said there will not be any new 121.5 ELTs manufactured. So eventually, through normal attrition, those ELTs are going to find themselves out of the system. So a 406 megahertz ELT is a much better option, especially here in Alaska, especially flying in remote and rural areas where you may not have another airplane flying over. So that's my recommendation. Obviously not a mandate. That's what I have in my aircraft. And we can talk offline as to the pros and cons and the reasons and the cost and all those other things, because there's a lot of things associated with making that decision. Pretty sure I've mentioned this in the past. Spot and InReach, Spider Tracks, Track Plus. There's several other manufacturers out there that are using some really neat satellite-based technology for active tracking, not just of aircraft, but all kinds of other assets and even hiking. Those are not required, and they do not substitute for an ELT. You are still mandated to have an ELT. Personally, I use Spider Tracks in both of my airplanes. A lot of reasons why. I also have an InReach device. People think I'm paranoid. I'm not. But the saying that just because you're paranoid doesn't mean that somebody's not out to get you. But I want somebody to come get me. I enjoy being in the backcountry. I love to hunt and fish. I love to camp. I love to do it on my terms. And if there's an accident, I want to have the capability to communicate and get help when it's needed. So all of that, spending 10 minutes to be able to explain those different things as far as what those are and what's needed. And all that conversation got started because of the tragic accident, mid-air collision on the Kenai Peninsula last week. So Robin, I appreciate sending that information, emergency position, and the preview doesn't show all the rest of it, but that's okay. I'm going to keep going and not jump out of the live event to read that text, but do appreciate that, Robin. That's good. Good to know that people are paying attention. Thank you for that. The big conversation that's happened as a result of that tragic midair, a lot of folks are talking about ADS-B again, and talking about the pros and cons of equipping, and the pros and cons of equipping with ADS-B in versus just ADS-B out, and the cost associated with it, and the requirements of it, and where can we fly and where can't we fly, and Big Brother's watching me, and some folks are saying, I don't care about Big Brother anymore because I want to be able to see other aircraft. Very lively discussions on social media. I was very encouraged to see that. I refrained from engaging in a lot of that because I wanted to see what everybody else was saying. I wanted to see where the conversation was going to go. And I'll tell you, I'm pleased to hear a lot of people who have been against ADS-B equipage now coming around and saying, I can see the benefits of maybe having this technology. What I've also found is that a lot of people still do not understand what ADS-B is. They don't understand the difference between in and out. They don't understand what's mandated and what's not. They don't understand where it's mandated and where it's not. And they don't understand what it gets you when you equip without, or if you equip with in, or if you equip with both. I'm also finding still that people don't understand the difference between 978 out and 1090 out, and when that's required versus another, and the benefits of back and forth. So please, please, please do your homework. And I'm going to say it this way because just because you see it and read it on social media does not mean it's truthful and accurate. I can't believe I have to say that these days. I think we all know and understand that just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true and factual. Fact checked, do your homework, get your information from reliable sources. If you're having a hard time figuring out what's reliable and what's not, please reach out to me. I can help you navigate, find those good sources, find those places that will help you understand what's going on, help you understand what you get when you buy a certain thing and what you don't get. It's very complicated. It really is. And it shouldn't be. My personal, I've been involved with this from a long time ago. Actually, I've been flying in Alaska since pre-Capstone days, was around in the YK Delta when that whole thing started happening with Capstone. And Capstone was a huge, huge program that was very beneficial, and that's the basis of ADS-B. All that to say is I've been around the block a few times with this stuff. I understand what's going on. Part of my role as government affairs with the Alaska Airmen is getting involved deeply with this stuff. And just a very quick overview. ADS-B out is the only part that is mandated and required by the FAA. But it is only mandated and required in Alaska if you fly over 18,000 feet, or if you fly inside or above the Anchorage Class C airspace. Those are the only places in Alaska ADS-B out is required. But we all know that just because it's required doesn't mean that, just because it's legal doesn't mean it's safe. We've all heard that. Just because it's required there doesn't mean it's not a good idea to have it some other place in other ways that you're flying here in the state. ADS-B in is not required. ADS-B in is sometimes the most cost-effective and cheapest way to get some of this system going, but it is not required. The reason for that is because the FAA wanted industry to come up with and be innovative and come up with good ideas and good solutions, and so they decided the best way to do that was to not mandate a standard when it comes to displays, when it comes to radio receivers, all those things that are mandated for the TSO'd ADS-B out solutions. And again, with aviation, we're using acronyms all the time, and I'm just realizing that I'm throwing around acronyms like it's candy. So again, if you have questions about this, If you don't understand what ADSB will really do for you, or if you think you understand and somebody's told you no, you don't get it, do your homework. Make sure you really know what's happening. Make sure you really understand the benefits and the shortcomings. There are a lot of shortcomings here in Alaska for ADSB, primarily because we do not have a robust minimum operational network. That's using an FAA term and putting it into a different area, because I don't think we have a minimum operational network of ground stations here in the state. And because we don't, there's a lot of limitations to this program for that reason. So on a good note, before all this happened with this tragedy last week, myself with the Alaska Airmen's Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, the Alaska Aviation Safety Foundation, the Alaska Air Carriers Association, the list goes on and on and on. We've approached the FAA and said, hey, we need more ground stations. We've even gone as far as to say, we would like to have better coverage in this area and in that area, in this part of the state. The Kenai Peninsula was one of those areas that was on the short list. I reached out to the FAA and got an answer back. What's the status of getting more ground stations here in the state of Alaska? Because the FAA realizes they have some gaps and some holes in coverage, and they want to try to fix that, but it all boils down to money. So here's where the latest is. The FAA is progressing with trying to find more information about what it's going to take to get better coverage in certain areas here in the state. They've narrowed it down to a short list, and we're not going to get into all those details right now, but again, if you want more information, please reach out to me. And so the FAA does not operate or own the ground-based transmitter system. They contract that out. So they've gone to the contractor and said, hey, what's it going to take? What's it going to cost? What's kind of the timelines? Give us some more information. If we were to put towers, because they're basically, essentially, for the lack of a better term, like a cell phone tower, if we get better coverage in this area, what's that going to cost us? And so now the FAA has started that process. Doesn't mean there's going to be money available. I can tell you, though, that we have strong congressional support for getting more ADSB ground stations in Alaska. And that's a very good thing. Pre-mid-air collision Friday week ago. So we're trying. It's a slow process. The FAA, to their credit, understands our need. They understand our desire to have more ground stations. The FAA, however, has to balance that with cost. They have to balance that with budgets. And they have to make a business case. And so part of that business case is that the number of people equipped in a certain area, does that justify putting in the ground stations? And that's the whole chicken versus the egg discussion. I've talked about that before. If you've been to any of the updates at the Great Alaska Aviation Gathering, I've talked about that in previous years. You know, at some point, somebody's got to make the investment first. The FAA wants to make sure that we've made the investment, but why would we make the investment if there's no benefit? So anyway, there's a lot of that back and forth. So there is progress, though, and that's a good thing. There is progress on that front. Still a couple of years out at the earliest is my guess, but we're working on it, and so is the FAA. Want to also remind you that in the last edition of the transponder, and you've probably seen some emails going around and some things on Facebook asking about your usage of the cabins in Southeast Alaska. The cabins that are out there that the Forest Service has that are available, that you can go online and you can register and basically get a reservation for and go out and enjoy those cabins. We need to make sure that the aviation community knows that they're available. We need to make sure that the aviation community is using those cabins, and we want to make sure that the aviation community is letting the Forest Service know that we appreciate it and that we benefit from those cabins and that we want to see those cabins stay. The Forest Service is in the middle of an evaluation of those cabins, trying to figure out which ones do they want to keep, which ones do they want to let go away, and they need our input. So go back and read that article in the transponder if you haven't already. If you don't know what I'm talking about, reach out to me via email or social media here, and I can give you some more details and more information. Look for another article in the next edition of the Transponder going into some more details about those cabins and ways that you can use them. You know, the governor has asked that we travel around the state and enjoy being tourists in our own state. Early on in the pandemic, that was mentioned that we do that. That's been kind of, I wouldn't say withdrawn, but at least reevaluated, and we want to make sure that we are not going against health mandates with traveling around. But this is the summer to be a tourist in your own home state. And so get out and use those things if you at all possibly can. Speaking of health mandates and traveling around, something else that the Airmen's Association has been very active in is to add input to the Governor's Aviation Advisory Board for a resolution that's in the works to see about setting up a central clearinghouse on the state's website on the COVID-19 information page, where it has all of the local village travel restrictions as an official source for those. It's been incredibly difficult to go and find that information and know that you are doing the right thing. So we're working really hard with the Governor's Aviation Advisory Board to figure out a way to do that for us so that that information is in one central place. We know it's truthful, we know it's accurate, we know it's current. And so that's something that we're working on. Effective today, August 11th, non-residents entering the state of Alaska have to show verification and proof of a negative test result for COVID before they can be allowed to enter. So there's been some changes with that whole health mandate. I continually get some requests from people who live outside of Alaska who are not residents, who are trying to figure out, can we come to Alaska in our own airplane? And it's just simply not a good idea this year, especially with some of the new mandates that have come out in the past 3 weeks. So we'd love to have you. We'd love to see you up here. I know you would like to come up and see Alaska, but this summer just doesn't seem to be the summer for that. Some people have been able to do that very successfully already this summer, but that was before some of these latest mandates came out, and it's getting more and more difficult to do that. Still possible, but difficult. So if you're planning on doing that, please reach out to me. Would love to talk with you, love to help you evaluate your plans and find out if it's a good thing to do that this summer or save it for next summer. So looking at my list here, the special FAR 118 was given some COVID relief for all kinds of things coming all the way from flight reviews to airworthiness directives to currency requirements, all kinds of things that are involved in that special FAR. We've been told by the FAA Administrator, Steve Dickinson, who himself has a long career of being a pilot, so he understands, he gets this, that that special FAR is going to be continually reevaluated and that there is no definitive end date for that special FAR. So my guess is, based on some of the language coming out of Washington, D.C., is that if we need more time, they're going to give us more time. If they see that we're still running into problems and difficulties with keeping our currency because of the pandemic, then we'll continue to go with that special FAR. With that, though, I know a lot of people, there's some different ideas as to what's really going on with this and how serious and how severe is the pandemic. You look at the numbers and some people are saying, well, my goodness, the percentage-wise and all this, it's not that big a deal, back and forth. We know it's hurt the economy. We know we want to get things back up and running. The governor was having a press conference tonight about a lot of that. I was able to watch some of it, but then I had to get ready for this, and so I wasn't able to finish what he said. So my plan is to go back and watch that probably early in the morning and see what else he may have said there. There is no denying and there is no argument that the past few months have not been good for our economy. And there's no argument and no denying that regardless of what side of the fence you may come on when it comes to social distancing and face mask and all these other things, which we're not going to get into, we have a long road ahead of us to get out of the situation that we find ourselves in. And this pandemic is not over. And so just today we had a staff meeting the Airmen's Association trying to figure out what's this going to look like down the road, what are we going to do here. We've got some timelines and some dates that are coming up that are very critical for us as an organization and some of our activities. And so I can't talk too much about that because we're still very much in the planning process of everything. But just so you know, we are evaluating and we're looking at these things and we're trying to make the best decisions that we can without being able to know what the future holds and what's going to happen this time next year. What is it going to look like next spring? But we're looking at it. We're working on it. We are not going to wait and then not be prepared. So rest assured, the Airmen's Association is still active and vital. Your membership is more important now than it's ever been, and we appreciate you for keeping your membership current and active. And if you're not current and active, shame on you. Call the office tomorrow morning, get online tonight, and renew that membership. One of the things that, if you're a current member, you've been getting some emails about, which is going to be pretty exciting. August 20th was a Thursday evening. Mr. Mike Patey of Draco fame and Scrappy fame now, which, by the way, if you're not watching those videos, that's an incredible airplane that Mike Patey is building right now. And have you noticed he's been wearing his Alaska Airmen's jacket several times in most of those videos. So you can see that logo here on my hat. You can see that on one of his jackets. So he's a great friend of the Airmen's Association, and he has graciously accepted the invitation to do a live question and answer on Thursday, August 20th. And if you're a member, you'll get the information for that Zoom meeting. And so another reason to go ahead and get your membership updated and current. So some of the great things that we're doing here for our members. So that's pretty much going to wrap things up. I haven't seen any questions pop up. Let me just see if I'm actually doing the right thing here on Facebook to be able to see those, because I haven't seen anything pop up. Oh, there we go. So yeah, folks are interacting. And then Instagram, a lot of folks, actually from all over the world. It's pretty incredible where Instagram is getting out versus Facebook. Facebook tends to be more membership based, and Instagram is, because of our photos, a lot of people from all over the world are watching over Instagram. So I do appreciate folks interacting here, and just a reminder that this will be posted on YouTube probably tomorrow, depending on when Victoria gets to that, when she gets to the office tomorrow. Yeah, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for sending in those questions. We appreciate, again, our members. We appreciate the aviation community in Alaska. Alaska is a very big place, but it's a very small community, and aviation is even a tighter community than just normal. So again, thanks for tuning in, I guess would be the word to use, even though we're not sitting there tuning dials like we do when we're out at the cabin trying to get that AM station from a long ways off. So anyway, until next time, I want to say stay safe, fly right, keep the dirty side down, and blue skies and tailwinds.